Have you ever asked a question that made someone freeze, as if their entire world was about to crumble? Imagine if that question exposed a hidden truth they could never face. What if I told you that the person who seems the most confident in the room might actually be the one most afraid of the truth? That beneath the surface of their arrogance lies an immense fear, one they'll go to great lengths to protect. The narcissist lives in a world of illusion, and the moment that illusion is challenged, everything they've built starts to fall apart. But why does it unravel so easily, and what does it reveal about the person behind the mask? The narcissist's identity is built entirely on illusion. It's not merely that they lie to other sits, that they lie to themselves, constantly reshaping who they think they are and what they represent. They create a fragile, artificial version of themselves, one that craves admiration, demands superiority, and clings to control. This false self is so vital to them that they will guard it with everything they have. It's the reason they react so aggressively to criticism, why they rewrite history to fit their narrative, and why they avoid true self-reflection at all costs. The moment someone even slightly punctures that illusion, it's as though they face a terrifying reality they can't bear to confront. What's fascinating is that most people mistakenly believe narcissists are confident. They confuse arrogance with self-assurance, manipulation with leadership, and entitlement with strength. But the reality is far from that. A narcissist is deeply insecure. Their entire psychological structure is based on avoiding a fundamental truth that they are not the perfect superior being they project to the world. The image they present is not who they are. So, when someone asks just one precise, well-aimed question that challenges this false image, it throws them into a panic. They aren't ready to answer truthfully because they are only prepared to manipulate. Take a moment to think about that. Most people, when questioned about their behavior or motives, will reflect even if it's uncomfortable. A psychologically healthy person might initially become defensive, but with time, they will consider the validity of the question. They may even seek the truth. However, a narcissist cannot afford to do that. They've spent their entire life running from the truth. Instead of reflecting, they react with defensiveness, denial, or outright hostility. They will do anything but confront the uncomfortable reality that your question has exposed. This is the core reason why narcissists fear being questioned. It's not the question itself that threatens them. It's what the question represents. A challenge to their control, a crack in the image they've meticulously crafted, and a potential unraveling of the false self they've spent years, sometimes decades building. What happens when the illusion finally begins to break? What will they do to protect the very image that defines them? To explore this, let's look at the deeper consequences of that unraveling in the next part. To continue from where we left off, remember that the moment you challenge a narcissist's carefully constructed reality, you are not just asking a question, you are revealing a hidden truth, one that they will do anything to suppress. This truth threatens everything they've worked to maintain, and the fear of it is overwhelming. When you ask a narcissist something as simple as, "Why do you always blame others when something goes wrong?" it cuts straight to the core. If they were a person grounded in reality, they might pause. They might feel uncomfortable, even a bit embarrassed, but ultimately, they would reflect on their behavior. A healthy person would take that moment to consider their actions, but a narcissist? They won't reflect. Instead, they will retaliate. They will deflect the blame onto you or someone else, or they'll turn the tables and accuse you of being the problem, simply for daring to question them. Why? Because to admit even the smallest flaw would mean confronting the painful truth. They are not the perfect, superior being. They want everyone to believe they are. That truth is something they can never face. This is also why narcissists rely so heavily on gaslighting. They need to manipulate your perception of reality to make you question your own thoughts and feelings. If they can get you to doubt your memory, your perception, or even your emotions, they can continue living in the distorted fantasy they've created. But when you ask the right question, one that forces them to confront their contradictions, they lose control of the narrative, and that's when the real breakdown happens. Now, this is crucial. Many people misunderstand narcissistic behavior. They might think, if I just explain myself better, they'll understand. Or, if I prove that I'm not their enemy, they'll treat me with respect. But here's the fundamental mistake. A narcissist is not engaging in good faith. They are not looking for truth, they are looking for dominance. The moment they feel that dominance slipping, they react like a cornered animal, desperate to regain control by any means necessary. When you ask a narcissist a question that forces them to face reality, you are doing something incredibly powerful. You are momentarily breaking the spell they've cast not just over you, but over themselves. And if you watch closely, you'll see something remarkable. For a brief moment, you'll see the fear in their eyes. You'll see cracks form in their carefully maintained persona because in that instant, they are forced to confront the one thing they've spent their entire life avoiding, the truth about who they really are. But here's the key. What happens after you ask the question is just as important as the question itself. Because once you engage in their defensiveness, once you try to argue, explain, or rationalize, you give them the opportunity to manipulate their way out of it. The true power lies not in getting the answer, but in refusing to let them regain control. Let's explore why this is so important and how it can change the way you interact with them moving forward. Picking up from where we left off, the true power lies not in the question itself, but in how you allow it to linger. By asking the question, you've already begun to expose the cracks in their carefully crafted image, but the real impact comes in letting the silence fill the space, letting the weight of the question settle in. Watch their reaction carefully, not just their words, because their words will always be an attempt to regain control. It's in their reaction that the truth reveals itself, and that is where you'll see the cracks in their facade. If you understand this, you will never again be caught in their web. You will recognize that narcissists don't fear confrontation, they don't fear anger, and they certainly don't fear conflict. In fact, they thrive on these things. What they truly fear, what terrifies them at their core, is exposure. And sometimes all it takes to expose them is one simple, undeniable question. So, the next time you find yourself dealing with someone who manipulates, gaslights, and twists reality to suit their needs, someone who refuses accountability, remember this. You don't need to argue. You don't need to fight. You just need to ask the right question and watch them struggle under the weight of a truth they cannot face. The narcissist's greatest fear isn't a fight, it's exposure. But exposure doesn't always come from a direct confrontation. In fact, one of the most effective ways to expose a narcissist is to ask them a question they simply cannot answer honestly. It's not because they don't know the answer, but because to answer truthfully would require them to contradict the very foundation of their carefully constructed persona. That's when they lose control. And that is when their panic begins to set in. This is crucial to understand. A narcissist operates within a framework of deception. Self-deception first, and then the deception of others. Their entire identity is built upon maintaining an illusion, and they must control how others perceive them at all times. This is why they are so skilled at manipulation, why they rewrite history, why they twist reality to suit their narrative. It's not just about power over you, it's about preserving their own fragile sense of self. So when you ask them a question that cuts through this illusion, you are doing something incredibly dangerous from their perspective. You are challenging the very mechanism that keeps their world intact. A well-placed question doesn't need to be aggressive. It doesn't need to be accusatory. In fact, the more calm and straightforward it is, the more effective it becomes. Imagine, for instance, asking a narcissist something as simple as, "Why do you think nothing is ever your fault?" On the surface, it seems like an ordinary question direct, yes, but not particularly explosive. But in reality, it is devastating. Why? because it forces them to acknowledge a pattern of behavior they cannot afford to recognize. A psychologically stable person would answer that question honestly, reflecting on their own actions. But for a narcissist, to answer it truthfully is to expose their greatest vulnerability, their inability to face the truth about themselves. And that is the moment the mask begins to slip. So, the next time you are faced with a narcissist, remember that the power is not in their words, but in the silence you create by asking the right question. Now, let's take a closer look at why this silence is so effective and how you can use it to protect yourself from falling into their trap. Exposes them to you, and that is what ultimately sets you. Building on what we've already discussed, once you ask the right question and allow the silence to fill the room, you're doing more than just challenging their narrative. You're forcing them to confront their own cracks, and that is something they can't escape. Consider this. If you asked a psychologically healthy person why they always blame others when something goes wrong, they might initially react defensively, but eventually they would engage with the question. They might admit, well, I don't think nothing is my fault, but maybe I do struggle with admitting when I'm wrong. This would be a moment of self-reflection, an acknowledgement of their flaw-san indication that they have a relationship with reality. But a narcissist cannot allow themselves to go there. They must not. The moment they admit to a flaw, to any real accountability, the entire structure of their self-image begins to crumble. Instead, they deflect. They lash out. They turn the accusation back on you. Oh, so now I'm the bad guy? You're always blaming me. Maybe if you weren't so sensitive, we wouldn't have this problem in the first place. Notice what they're doing. They refuse to engage with the question itself because it's too dangerous. Instead, they shift the focus, reasserting control, ensuring that the conversation moves in a direction they can dominate. This tactic is crucial to understanding the narcissist's behavior. A person who cannot handle being questioned is a person who cannot handle reality. Once you realize this, you begin to see the narcissist for what they truly are. Not a powerful, confident figure, but someone who is running from the truth at all costs. And this is where their panic starts to show. The truth is, they are always running, always managing their image. They work tirelessly to ensure that no one sees behind the curtain. But when you force them to confront something they've been avoiding, they lose control. And a narcissist without control is a narcissist in crisis. You will see this loss of control in their reaction. Even if it's just for a moment, their composure cracks, their voice might rise, their arguments become frantic. The need to reassert dominance becomes desperate. They might become cruel, they might play the victim, or they might storm off in anger. No matter the tactic they choose, it will always be about escaping the question you've asked. But here's where the true power lies. Once you witness this scrambling, once you see them avoiding the answer, you can never unsee it. This moment changes everything. Because once you recognize that their strength is nothing more than an illusion, once you see the fear hiding beneath their arrogance, they lose their ability to manipulate you. You stop chasing their approval, stop trying to reason with them, stop believing in the persona they present, and at that moment, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer trapped in their game. This is why the right question, asked at the right moment, is such a powerful tool. It doesn't just expose the narcissist to others, it exposes them to you, and that, ultimately, is what sets you free. The moment you see them for who they truly are, the game ends. As we move forward, let's dive deeper into how this newfound clarity can change the way you protect yourself from their manipulation and how you can regain control of the situation. Building on our earlier point, remember that the key to exposing a narcissist lies not in arguing or seeking a direct answer, but in watching how they react to the question itself. The truth is simple. If someone cannot handle being questioned, they cannot handle being truly known. And A person who cannot be known can never offer you a real connection, genuine honesty, or true love. So don't waste your time trying to get a narcissist to answer truthfully. Just ask the question and observe their response. A narcissist's world is built on a fragile foundation, an illusion they must maintain at all costs. But here's what most people don't realize. The illusion isn't just for others. It's for themselves, too. They need to believe it. This is why they react so violently when questioned. It's not simply about controlling your perception, but about avoiding the truth they are terrified to face. And that's when their panic truly begins to set in. A narcissist functions within a carefully controlled environmental bubble where they are always right, always justified, always the victim or the hero, but never the villain. It's a psychological fortress they build around themselves, and they go to great lengths to make sure no one can penetrate it. They surround themselves with enablers, people who won't challenge them. They rewrite history when necessary, project their flaws onto others, and deflect any responsibility that might force them to look inward. But all of this depends on one thing: your participation. A narcissist does not exist in isolation. Their identity, their entire sense of self, is tied to the people around them and to how others perceive them. When you ask a question that disrupts this dynamic, when you refuse to buy into their version of reality, something remarkable happens. They begin to unravel. Not immediately, not obviously at first, but it's there. The cracks start to show. You see, when you expose a narcissist, you don't just reveal the truth to yourself, you force them to confront something they've spent their entire lives running from. This is an existential threat to them, and it's why they react with panic, anger, gaslighting, stonewalling, or desperate attempts to regain control. For them, control is not just a preference, it's survival. A narcissist cannot afford to see themselves clearly. This is why they constantly seek distraction, why they are always chasing validation, admiration, power, or attention. It's not because they are truly strong or secure. It's because they are hollow. The moment they stop receiving external affirmation, they are left with nothing but themselves, and that is a reality they simply cannot bear. So, when you ask a question that forces them to acknowledge their own inconsistencies, their own hypocrisy, their inability to take responsibility, it's not just uncomfortable for them, it's devastating. This is where the true power lies. Once you see through the illusion, once you understand that the narcissist's strength is nothing but a facade, you can start to shift the dynamic. You will never again be trapped in their game, and you'll be able to regain control over the situation. But what happens next? How can you protect yourself from their manipulative tactics? Let's continue by exploring how you can move forward and protect your boundaries while keeping your peace intact. Picking up where we left off, remember that when you force a narcissist to confront reality, you are doing more than just asking a question. You are shaking the very foundation of their carefully crafted illusion. You are pulling the rug out from under them, forcing them to face something they've spent years, decades, even denying. And this is why their panic can be so intense. Watch closely what happens in these moments. The first reaction is often rage, because anger is a defense mechanism. It's their way of reasserting dominance, trying to scare you into submission. If that doesn't work, they will shift to manipulation. They will try to confuse you, make you question yourself. They'll twist the conversation, bring up past grievances, and attempt to put you on the defensive. But if that fails, if you remain calm and refuse to engage in their game, something even more telling happens. The fear sets in. They realize that they are losing control, and that's when the self-destruction begins. Once a narcissist realizes they can no longer manipulate you, once they sense that you are no longer under their spell, they begin to spiral. They'll try to regain control by any means, necessaries marring your reputation, playing the victim, lashing out dramatically. But here's the key. It won't work. Because by that point, you've already seen the truth. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. This is why exposing a narcissist is such a profound act. It doesn't change Themo. They will fight against that truth with everything they have. But what it does is change you. You stop making excuses for them. You stop trying to fix them. You stop believing in the carefully crafted persona they've presented. And that, in itself, is enough to begin dismantling their power over you. In the end, a narcissist's greatest fear is not being alone, and it's not even losing control. Their greatest fear is the truth. The moment you refuse to participate in their illusion, you force them to face it, and that is the beginning of their undoing. A narcissist's reality is built on a fragile foundation, one that depends entirely on the perceptions of others. They are not self-sustaining individuals. They are psychological parasites, feeding off attention, validation, and control. And when you expose them, when you ask the right question that forces them to reveal the contradictions in their own narrative, you do something far more profound than simply challenging them. You unravel the illusion they have spent a lifetime constructing. The reason this is so devastating to a narcissist is that their entire self-concept is predicated on deception, both self-deception and the deception of those around them. They do not engage with reality the way a healthy person does. A healthy individual confronts their shortcomings, acknowledges their mistakes, and grows from them. But a narcissist cannot afford such honesty. Their identity is so fragile, so dependent on external reinforcement, that even the smallest crack in their illusion sends them into a spiral they can't control. So, how do you protect yourself once you've exposed the narcissist? How do you ensure you don't fall back into their trap? Let's explore the steps to safeguard your boundaries and reclaim your peace in the next section. As we've seen before, when you expose a narcissist, you are not just asking a question, you are unraveling the very fabric of their reality. The moment their carefully managed image cracks, it feels like an existential threat to them. And that's when the panic sets in. When you ask the question that cuts through their defenses, their reaction is swift. But it's not just the fear of being discovered by you that sends them into a frenzy. It's the fear of being discovered by themselves. Deep down, beneath all the layers of arrogance, manipulation, and grandiosity, there lies an abyss, a profound emptiness they are desperately trying to avoid. This is why they lash out. The anger, the gaslighting, the attempts to flip the script and make you the problem, it's all a frantic effort to reestablish control. They want to put the mask back on before any, including themselves, sees what's underneath. This is crucial to understand. A narcissist's response to exposure is not calculated in the way their usual manipulations are. It is reactive, instinctive. They panic because they don't know what else to do. But here's where it gets interesting. The moment you refuse to back down, the moment you maintain your composure and do not let their tactics work on you, something shifts. The narcissist, realizing they've lost control of the narrative, begins to unravel. Their responses become more erratic, their accusations more desperate. They may even contradict themselves, trying anything to regain the upper hand. And this is where you begin to see the truth. At their core, narcissists are not stable individuals. They are not grounded in any true sense of self. They are actors playing a role, and when the script is torn away, they don't know who they are anymore. They rely on others to reflect back the image they need to survive. But when you refuse to do that, when you expose them, when you strip away their ability to manipulate, you force them to confront something terrifying, the truth. Now, many people believe that exposing a narcissist will lead to some kind of reckoning. They think the narcissist will be forced to acknowledge their flaws and maybe even change. But that's not how it works. A narcissist cannot afford to acknowledge their flaws. To do so would be to admit weakness, to accept responsibility, and responsibility is something they've spent their entire lives evading. Instead, they will double down on their delusions, lashing out in increasingly desperate ways, trying to regain control over their crumbling world. This is where their self-destruction begins, because once their tactics stop working, once they lose the ability to manipulate and control, they have nothing left. They spiral. Their need for validation becomes insatiable. They may seek out new victims, but something has changed. The illusion is weaker now, the cracks harder to ignore. Whether they acknowledge it or not, the truth is starting to seep through, and the longer they resist it, the more they unravel. But what happens when the narcissist world collapses entirely? How do they react when they can no longer escape the truth? Let's explore this further as we dive into the final stages of their unraveling. As we've seen, once the narcissist's carefully constructed illusion begins to unravel, something inside them knows they've been seen for who they truly are. And that is the moment when the narcissist is at their most vulnerable, not because they will suddenly change, but because they are now fighting a battle they cannot win. The truth has been revealed, and once the truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. So, if you ever wonder whether exposing a narcissist is worth it, remember this: their power does not come from who they are, but from who they convince you they are. The moment you see through them, the moment you refuse to play their game, their illusion begins to crumble, and when that happens, their panic becomes inevitable. Their self-destruction is set in motion because the one thing a narcissist cannot survive is the truth. A narcissist's world is built on control over how they are perceived, control over the people in their lives, and control over the very reality they construct to maintain their fragile self-image. When you expose them, when you force them to confront something they cannot manipulate, that control begins to slip through their fingers. This isn't just a moment of discomfort for them. It is a catastrophic breach in the psychological fortress they've spent a lifetime building. You have to understand that narcissists do not experience the world the way you do. They do not interact with people as autonomous beings with their own needs, emotions, and perspectives. Instead, they see others as tools means to an end, objects to be used for validation, power, or convenience. They do not form genuine relationships. Instead, they craft dynamics in which they remain at the center. Every interaction, every connection is carefully constructed to serve their ego. So, what happens when that dynamic is disrupted? What happens when you, the person they assumed was under their influence, suddenly refuse to comply? It's like yanking the strings from a puppeteer's hands. The entire system breaks down, and the narcissist, who has spent years ensuring they're the one in control, suddenly finds themselves in the one position they fear most: powerless. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The narcissist's panic is not just emotional, it is existential. They do not merely fear being exposed to others, they fear being exposed to themselves. You see, the grandiose persona they project is not just a tool to manipulate the world, it's something they need to believe in. Without it, they would be forced to confront the reality of their own inadequacy, and that is a truth they are utterly incapable of handling. So when you ask the right question, when you expose a contradiction in their carefully curated narrative, what you are really doing is forcing them to look at something they've spent their entire life avoiding, the truth about who they really are. And that is the moment the facade truly begins to collapse. But what happens when the narcissist can no longer hold on to their illusion? How do they respond when their carefully built world starts to crumble? Let's take a closer look at how this process unfolds and how you can protect yourself moving forward. As we've seen, the moment you expose a narcissist, they are forced to confront something they have spent their entire lives avoiding. They are forced to look into a psychological mirror, and what they see there is horrifying. For all their arrogance, manipulation, and apparent confidence, at the core of a narcissist is an unbearable void and emptiness that they spend every waking moment trying to avoid. This is why they react with such fury, such desperation. It's not just about protecting their reputation or maintaining control over you. It's about protecting themselves from the truth, a truth that, if fully realized, could shatter them completely. This is what ultimately leads to their downfall. When a narcissist is exposed, their usual tactics, gaslighting, deflection, blame shifting, become less effective. People start to see through them. The cracks in their persona become visible, not just to others, but to themselves. And the more they fight to regain control, the more erratic and unstable they become. This is a pattern you will see time and time again. A narcissist, once exposed, does not respond with introspection or growth. They respond with self-destruction. They lash out. They spiral. They desperately try to salvage their crumbling reality, but in doing so, they only accelerate their own collapse. This is why exposing a narcissist is so powerful. Once the illusion is broken, it cannot be repaired. Once they have been seen for what they truly are, they cannot go back to the unquestioned authority they once held. They can they can manipulate new people, create new narratives, seek fresh sources of validation. But something has changed. The exposure lingers. The truth follows them. And deep down, beneath all their denial, they know it. So, if you ever find yourself wondering whether it's worth it, whether exposing a narcissist will truly make a difference, remember this. Their power is not in who they are. It is in who they convince you they are. The moment you see through them, the moment you refuse to participate in their illusion, you have already won, because the truth, once seen, does not go away. And for a narcissist, that truth is their greatest weakness. A narcissist's entire existence is predicated on the illusion of superiority, the belief that they are always in control, always right, always untouchable. But here's the irony. This belief is nothing but a facade, a fragile construct they must maintain at all costs. Because beneath that mask, they are nothing more than a terrified individual clinging to an illusion. And the moment you expose that illusion, the moment you force them to confront a truth, they cannot manipulate you, initiate a chain reaction of self-destruction. What you have to understand is that a narcissist does not merely thrive on deception, they depend on it. Their world is not built on honesty, but on lies and manipulation. The moment those lies start to unravel, the very foundation of their world begins to crumble. But what happens when their world falls apart completely? Let's continue and explore the final stage of their unraveling. As we've discussed, the moment you expose a narcissist and reveal the truth, you are not just challenging their narrative, you are stripping away the very foundation upon which their identity is built. Their world is not based on genuine strength, confidence, or self-awareness. It is built on a complex web of lies, self-aggrandizement, and the relentless suppression of their own inadequacies. This is why exposure is their greatest fear, because when someone truly sees through them, it threatens the very core of their being. So, when you reveal them for what they truly are, when you pull back the curtain and let others, and more importantly them, see what lies beneath, it does something catastrophic. It strips away their most effective tool, the ability to control perception. Without that control, they are left vulnerable, and vulnerability is something they cannot psychologically tolerate. This is why their reaction is so intense when confronted. You would think that if they were as confident, powerful, and superior as they claim to be, they would simply brush off criticism, but they don't. Instead, they become erratic, explosive, and desperate. Why? Because deep down, they know the truth. They know that the image they project is a fabrication, and when that image is challenged, even slightly, their entire psyche goes into panic mode. Here's where it gets even more interesting. The more they fight to maintain the illusion, the more obvious the illusion becomes. Their defensiveness, their rage, and their desperate attempts to regain control all serve as proof that they are not what they claim to be. This is the paradox of the narcissist. In their attempt to deny the truth, they inadvertently reveal it. This leads to an inevitable conclusion known that a narcissist cannot escape. When you expose them, when you force them to acknowledge, even unconsciously, that they are not as powerful as they claim to be, you set in motion a process of unraveling. And this unraveling is not something you need to actively participate in. It happens on its own. The narcissist begins to self-destruct because their entire identity is built on a foundation that cannot sustain reality. It starts with paranoia. They become hyper-aware of how others see them. Every interaction becomes a battle to reassert control. They start grasping at straws, fabricating new lies, and overcompensating in ways that only make them look more desperate. Then comes instability. Because they cannot introspect, because they cannot face their own flaws without psychological collapse, they begin to project. They lash out at those around them, alienating the very people they rely on for validation. And finally, there is the inevitable collapse. It might be a slow decline, where they push everyone away until they are left with nothing but their own emptiness. Or it might be a spectacular implosona series of self-sabotaging decisions that leave them exposed in ways they never anticipated. Either way, the end result is the same. They lose. Not because someone defeated them, but because their own nature made defeat inevitable. So, what does this mean for you? It means that the greatest power you have over a narcissist is not revenge, not confrontation, not even anger. It is simply the truth. Because the truth does not require force to be effective. It doesn't need manipulation or deceit. It simply is, and once it is seen, it cannot be unseen. So when you expose a narcissist, when you strip away the illusion, you do more than just reveal their deception to others. You force them to confront the one thing they fear most, themselves. And in that confrontation, they will either crumble or lash out. But either way, they will self-destruct. Because in the end, a narcissist's worst enemy is not Ute, is reality itself. Now, as we explore the final stages of this self-destruction, let's dive into how you can maintain your own sense of empowerment and well-being while the narcissist unravels. How can you protect yourself from their chaos and reclaim control over your own life? Let's find out.